which we could easily subtitle Life, Lists, and the Pursuit of Happiness, or occasionally unhappiness, depending on how the awards and the lists play out. But thank you to all of you for joining us today. We've got the last slot here at Tales of the Cocktail, so this is the last seminar for the week. So thank you for your stamina. Unfortunately, what that also means is we've also got the shortest slot. And we've got five, because I'm also guilty, extremely verbose people with a lot of strong opinions on a topic that we all care deeply about. So we'll work as hard as we can to try and stay on topic. All right, so let's just quickly dive in. Oh, sorry, here we go. See, there we are. All right, very, very quickly, again, for those of you that didn't get a chance, the network and password are there should you need it. And I want to say a massive thank you, first of all, to Tales of the Cocktail for giving us this platform to be able to discuss what I think is a very, very hot topic in the industry. And also to our sponsors. There we are, Patron Tequila, so thank you very much for them. They'll be underwriting the cocktails for today, and our first cocktail will be coming out momentarily. And Freeport, which is Bacardi's bartender education platform, a digital platform, and there's a download code for you in a second. All right, I want to jump straight into our panelists, and then we'll get into the drinks. So we've got, I'm very, very lucky today to have an audience of panelists, each of whom is representing a group with a vested interest, if you like, in awards, in lists, in rankings, and each of them brings their own expertise. So the first is an awards insider. So Vivian Pay, who's seated here to my right and on your left. And Vivian is the former Academy Chair for Asia for World's 50 Best Bars. Vivian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I think you just said it all. That's good.
Yeah.
No, I'm Chinese American, but I've lived overseas for a really long time, and Singapore was my home for 16 years. And when I arrived in Singapore, there was almost no cocktail scene. So I was very lucky to be able to see it grow from zero to world class in about just about a dozen years, very quickly. I would like to think that I had just a tiny bit to do with that, but really, it's really just that there's so much talent and passion in the region. So I was glad to be part of it, and although I'm no longer Academy Chair, obviously I did it for about 7 years, so I have lots of thoughts and feelings about it. Yes, and I'm still trying to do stuff in this space and in different ways, but here we are. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. And in terms of your own claim to fame, I think in 2018 you were a nominee, though not a winner, for Best Bar Groupie in Singapore. Is that right?
Yes. So Singapore has actually, we're going to talk about awards later, like the types of awards, but my favorite one is the Anti-Bar Awards in Singapore. I have a couple of brethren there who have heard of it and been participants, and actually a winner sitting over there. I think, Indra, weren't you the biggest sellout? Biggest sellout.
Fantastic.
Right there.
All right.
Applause, everybody. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and his speech was epic. Hopefully, maybe we can find it on YouTube later. So yes, that was. I didn't win, but I tried really hard.
Fantastic. And to some extent, that's what these awards are all about. Although, Indra, what an honour to have an actual award winner here in the room with us. So congratulations to you. All right, our next panellist is, Vivian is representing the voice of the awards themselves as the industry insider. Our next panellist probably needs no introduction. So Sandrae Lawrence, one half of the Cocktail Lovers. And Sandrae is here as a cocktail enthusiast and very much, I guess, the voice of your guests, the consumer, for want of a better term. Sandrae, would you like to introduce yourself and your passion for this topic?
Yeah, so my name's Sandrae Lawrence, and together with my husband sitting there over there, raise your hands.
Hello,
So we edit and publish the Cocktail Lovers magazine and podcast, and we got into this industry because we were, and still are, enthusiastic consumers. So we love to talk about cocktails from the consumer's perspective, and we are cocktail lovers, and that's what we've been doing for the past nearly 15 years. So I'm here to champion the voice of the consumers.
Absolutely fantastic. We're so lucky to have you here, Sandrae. Now, Sandrae also, in terms of her own influence, number 8 in the Bar World 100, which was just most recently published, as well as the winner for student road safety in a year that you would not confess to. So congratulations. And we have another award winner here on stage. All right.
And Gary, my husband there, was the winner of the Twister twisting competition. Let's twist again. Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
Twister, I used to love that, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations to you, Gary. I mean, I feel
Very
like we
agile.
shouldn't really be up on stage. So many award winners here. All right. And then representing the voice of the bar owner, we're very, very lucky to have from Sydney, Australia, by way of Italy, Stefano Catino, who's the owner of the Maybe Group. Stefano, introduce yourself. You are a current award winner, twice an award winner.
Twice, and I was very lucky to be twice award winner. Yeah. And no, I'm Italian originally. That's why there is a blue drink, because he likes it, and I needed to showcase my thing. But I've been living in Australia for the last 14 years, and it's probably the farthest country from anywhere. But it has probably one of the best cocktail scene, and it's been like that for the last 15 years. Before Neron Young left, and then he left me to take care of it. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. I think we're gonna have a good chat today.
Fantastic. And Stefano, in case you couldn't tell, is actually the winner in the 2017 Alternative Bar Awards for the industry's worst accent. So congratulations.
Was any sexy accent?
I heard worst.
Worst.
Yeah.
That was sexy for some reason.
All right. And then representing the voice of the bartender, perhaps the slightly cynical true voice of the independent bartender, is the indie bartender himself, Danil Nevsky.
How you doing? Yeah, I'm Dan. I talk to bartenders way too much in dive bars, and they tell me all of the dirt on all of you. I hear about it, and then I talk about it, and then I analyze it, and then the reason I do this is because I have too much confidence. And secondly is because I believe that you can complain about the river flowing in one direction from the side, but you have to get into the river and stand opposite it if you really want to make a change. So that's why I do what I do.
Wow, that was deeply philosophical for day 4 of Tales.
Wow, very deep.
So Dan, of course, is the fourth place getter in the Karate Kata competition of 2001. So again, another auspicious claim to fame, as well as number 2 in the Bar World 100, which was just recently published. Well, normally at this point, most bartenders and bar owners would say, well, if he was number 2, then it was obviously rigged. But if you know Monica Berg, she probably was quite deserving of number 1, but sadly she was not available today. All right, and then finally, let me just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Jacob Briars. I work with Bacardi, so we're a collection of global brands, and it's often our job to underwrite as a series of brands, everything from the Spirited Awards to the 50 Best Bars to every guest shift that seems to be now part and parcel of bars trying to make themselves more famous. Once upon a time, my relevance, if you like, for standing up here, I was for a long time, for 10 years actually, the international chair of the Spirited Awards. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Those are the Tales of the Cocktail Award. We'll talk about their claims to fame. And in 1994, I was the South Island Junior Speech Prize winner. So that's my claim to fame. So we're all award winners and have got a remarkable pedigree for being up here on our own right. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. All right, cocktails are on the way. But I just want to jump into our hot topics first. We're going to cover pretty wide-ranging topics. We're going to dive in. We'll have a free exchange of opinions, I think it would be fair to say. But we're going to talk a little bit about the rise of rankings. So how did we come to be so obsessed as an industry with lists, with awards, with kind of ranking ourselves, and how did it become such a global phenomenon within our industry, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of that approach? We'll talk about the awards themselves, so we'll give out our own list, the most awarded awards, if you like. We'll talk about a little bit about how they work. For those of you who are bartenders, bar owners, you may not fully understand the mechanics about how each of these lists or awards is actually derived. We're going to talk about the impact that it has on the consumer, the impact that it has on the bar owner, and the impact that it has on bartenders as well. And then we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of each of the various approaches as well. So a quick story, if I may, before we get into the first cocktail. We wanted to ask this question for us, really, pose a question. Are awards more important today than they ever have been before? So I was lucky enough to start my bartending career last millennium, and it was extremely short. I really only did 5 years, I guess, of proper bartending, which is probably on par, like a brand ambassador's guest shift. I started late and finished early. But awards were very much localized at that point. So you would have the restaurant reviewer from a particular town who would hand out the award for typically something like Bar of the Year or Best Cocktails in a City. And then you'd have a group of media organizations, Time Out probably being the most famous, that would put out a list for the year, the best place to get coffee, the best place that year for food, and the best place for cocktails. And they weren't particularly controversial, typically because they were, first of all, bars and restaurants were just thrilled that anybody wrote about them at all, right? So that fillip of press, if you like, became incredibly important. But they were also often the opinion of one person. And so much like reading, the movie critic or the music reviewer for the weekend newspaper, you thought, well, that's the opinion of so-and-so. I don't typically agree with everything they say, but I can kind of clock that it makes sense. Right, so that's how kind of awards started in the sense of, and what they also were typically was, the language was always typically Bar of the Year, Cocktail of the Year, right? And so they were a little less hard. The language was much easier to understand. And then in 2007, Tails kicked off the Spirited Awards and was the first to try and globalize these awards and rankings. To give you a sense of how much attention we paid to these awards back then compared to now, this is the 50 best bars list from its inaugural year. Well, it's the bottom half, actually. And this is the 50 best bars list from 2009. And the reason I put this up on stage is one of the bars on this list was owned by a good friend of mine and colleague, Dickie Cullimore, who is the global ambassador for Bacardi rum. And I was going through these lists and ranking them and working out, how they changed over time. And I said to Dickie, how did it feel for you when you got your bar on the list? And he was very confused, and he said, no, I don't know what you mean. I was Christchurch Young Bartender of the Year in 2003. Dickie's bar was called Double Happy. It was there in number 48. And when I spoke to him 2 weeks ago and asked him what he thought about it, he literally had never heard of the fact that his bar had been on this list. Right? So for 15 years, and then, of course, unfortunately in Christchurch, 6 months later, there was a massive earthquake and his bar was destroyed. And so he is arguably the most successful bar owner in history because his bar was on 100% of lists for which it was eligible. But anyway, he truly, for 15 years, had absolutely no idea that his bar is on the list. Could you imagine that today, when bartenders kind of, wait nervously by the Instagram, waiting for the announcement, clocking the different bars and rankings, and then saying, fantastic, we're bar number 37 or we're bar number 48. How the hell is bar number 47 ahead of us? They don't even keep their vermouth in the fridge, right? So people would be kind of ranking and are much more obsessed about these awards today. And we're going to try and talk about why that is. But first, a question for each of you. So these days we now use the superlative language. So we talk about best, right? The best American bar, the best new cocktail bar, the 50 best bars list. And that change of language from Bar of the Year to best bars, I think feels like a semantic one, but I actually think it's quite important in terms of influence. So for each of you, what does it mean to be best? And what's the criteria by which you might... Stefano, you look slightly alarmed, so I'm going to go with Vivian first and we'll work across.
I wasn't.
So.
But,
It's that look. Best, I think we can probably all agree, it's very subjective, especially when there is no specific criteria put down as a, when you are a voter in some of these rankings. Thank you very much. This will help. This is the best. That there is, it is very subjective. I mean, I know what I think is a best bar, and I will, assess a venue according to that list. For me, it's, there's things like I want the music and the lighting to be right. I mean, drinks is a minimum. I think everyone has to have proper drinks, but above and beyond, I will talk about lighting, ambiance, music. I would want to have some great bar snacks, and of course, above all, is the hospitality. So that's my best, right? But that might not necessarily be your best. So that is where I struggle with the word best often. And so some of the awards that are coming out, there's a new award coming out now, Pinnacle Guide. I mean, I think the ability to have a little bit more of criteria could perhaps guide people. Yes, I think it's an ongoing debate, at least internally.
If we're talking in terms of best generally as a word, for consumers as well, they're looking for something like that. How do you choose a bar to go to or a place to go to, a restaurant, whatever? If you have it, with best in front of it, it means that it's something that you should aspire to. So I think that having labels like best help consumers to direct themselves to go to certain places. And with bars, that helps a lot.
It does, yeah.
Whether it is best or not, that's by the by. But
That's down to the judges, I
Yeah.
suppose. Man.
I think that most of the stuff falls into like 4 categories, right? Number 1, the people who don't know anything about our 1% subculture, about these things that we do, couldn't give a shit. It doesn't matter to them. If you work in a normal bar and you don't know about any of this, you just crack on. For you, it means nothing. If you are part of the subculture, you want to always compare yourself to stuff. If you're a bartender that wants to find affirmation, it's no longer good enough to win a competition, a cocktail comp. It's no longer good enough to win. You know, there's now a ladder, an infinite ladder of supposed fame. And then there's, I would call, the smaller group, which is the enlightened group. Usually they're the people who've won and realized that it's a very lonely place up there, and also, in reality, nobody cares.
Not the be-all, end-all.
So now they've either decided to climb a bigger mountain, which could be like mainstream success. I think a lot of people are now trying to become the Gordon Ramsay of the bar world, sort of thing. And there's that enlightened group. And the last group, which I just called out a number, I didn't know I was going to end up here, so here we are. The 4th group is the people who want to use awards for other things. Like, for example, they want to get job opportunities. It becomes more of a tool for career progression. I think that's the way I identify it. And that, as a result, when you look at it this way, best is different for every single group for a different reason.
Yep.
Dostoevsky, fantastic.
Yeah.
Best for me.
Maybe Sammy's the
Sammy's
best!
No,
Italy's the best!
wait for Italy. No, try to be the best. It's not easy. I think we all try a little bit. I say to my team, and you just say in the light, the music. How come everybody talk about the light, the music, and still you walk to hundreds bar and they got this thing wrong? So it's not that common. Common sense is not that common, and the gods live in details. So I think to be the best, when I walk to Indra's bar, for example, the air conditioning is perfect, the lighting is perfect, the room feels good, the drinks are good. There is a lot of details. For me, it's all about the detail. To be the best, but not one day, or when the bartenders are in town, or when your friends, or when Jacob's come in. For everybody. You're only good if you're good for everybody. You're only the best if you're the best for everybody. It's too easy to be the best for the one you think they're going to vote for you or whatever. That's an easy job. So don't be the best for those people, be the best for everybody. That's my best.
Fantastic. All right, we're getting into very democratic sentiments already. You've got a drink in front of you, so I just want to quickly introduce that, if I may. So this is a cocktail inspired very much, I think, well, first of all, we wanted to serve champagne for a couple of reasons. First of all, today is the day of the Spirited Awards. Although the fact that you guys are here probably means most of you aren't up for those awards, otherwise you'd be away getting ready. Although Danil and Sandrae are here, so we've got champagne on arrival. The other is, it became very much a calling card of the very best bars in the world. So the Artesian, which was the reigning heavyweight champion of the world's best bars in the mid, what do we call that era? The teens. Anyway, half a glass of champagne on arrival was their calling card, and it put you in an exceptional mood, and thus more likely to vote for the Artesian when awards came around. So a champagne drink seemed like a good idea. Tequila also seemed like a great idea, Patron being our sponsor. So we're serving a cocktail from one of the nominees for the Best New American Cocktail Bar, Medium Cool of Miami Beach. This is a Patron, a Champagne Paloma. So we've got Patron Al Alto, Martini Bitter, Grapefruit, soda, and a little Billicar Salmon Rosé to get you in the right mood for awards. Created, of course, by Naren Young, who's here hiding incognito in the yellow hat. So thank you, Naren, for letting me steal your recipe.
Couldn't point him out in the room.
All right. So this was actually a meeting last night at the old Absinthe House. These are the people putting together the awards for today. So let's talk about how the awards are chosen, because obviously we concentrate an enormous amount on these awards, but many bartenders, bar owners, consumers, press may not understand how each of them works. And each of the lists is very much a reflection of how the awards themselves work. So each of them has been designed in a certain way, with a certain voting and structure and a certain way of selecting judges. And then the list and the awards that they generate are very much an outcome of that design. So one thing I want to stress before we start and get into this is there are no smoke-filled rooms. Right, so every single one of these awards, and we're going to talk about the four perhaps we think that are most significant, are filled with people who are desperately trying to do this as well as they possibly can because they want to celebrate success and excellence in the industry. And I'm going to talk about the features and the bugs, if you like, but I want to preface that before we dive into it. So. All right, we'll start with the biggest. We are in New Orleans, and this was the first of the global awards, if you like, which was the Spirited Awards, which launched in 2007, and it's held today in New Orleans this evening. So to all the nominees and finalists, I wish you all the best. 336 judges are currently in the pool, and each of those is publicly listed, so you know who they are. Right? You can go and find that information. It's very, very easy. They typically will tell you, and they're chosen because of their profile and their expertise. They're then allocated across several different subcategories. So the primary distinction between the Spirited Awards and all other awards is it has three parts. So there is a US awards for which bars and bartenders and ambassadors and bar teams who operate in the United States are the only ones who are eligible for those. And that makes perfect sense because these are the awards that are held in the United States. They're the largest, and so it makes sense that we'd recognize excellence in America. Then we have international, which is every country that isn't in the United States. And sometimes those lines can be a little bit vague. And then a little bit confusingly, we also have some World's Awards. So World's Best Cocktail Menu, World's Best Drink Selection, and World's Best Bar, as well as Media Awards as well. So judges will be allocated based on their expertise, regional expertise. So in the United States, do you know, are you familiar with bars on the East Coast, the Central Region, or the West Coast? You'll be assigned to a judging panel based on your expertise, and you're supposed to make nominations based on the area for which you're most familiar. In 2019, Tails also launched regional top 10s to draw in more diversity as well. Perhaps the most important part, every single judge, sorry, Sandrae, you all right? You need some more champagne, Paloma? Okay. Perhaps the most important thing is, again, a list is generated which has 30 names on it for American finalists, but that's not what judges are asked to vote for. They're only asked to rank out of an entire list the top 5. So they first vote on their own regional category. So if you're in the US and the West region, you can only vote for bars in that region. And then you allocate, across that pool of nominees. There were 4,500 nominations this year, spread across international and US categories. And you vote and you generate a shortlist. The 10 best bars, best hotel bars, best restaurant bars, etc., in your region. And then the entire organization, international and US, will then vote on the top 10 for which they're most familiar. But you only get 5 votes. And each of those is weighted. So that's another kind of thing that you'll notice as we go through these awards. People don't get 50 votes or 150 votes ranking. They get to very much have a snapshot. And so they're thinking, what are the bars and restaurants where I've had the best experience in the last 12 months that I might vote for? Okay. The next is 50 Best Bars, which launched in 2009, and it's kind of, to some extent, a spin-off of 50 Best Restaurants, which in turn was a spin-off of Restaurant Magazine, and it was very, very successful, and it created a lot of hype, and chefs like to get together and drink, and there's a lot of money washing around the restaurant industry, so it felt like a good extension of this. And in 2009, as we said at the start, people really didn't know that this list was happening, and in fact, oftentimes, people in places like India, South Africa, Dubai will say, these awards, this list that really doesn't represent my region. And I will usually say, have you gone back to see how many of your bars got nominated in 2009? Because the answer is a lot. In 2015, the list, the 50 best, confusingly, became a list of 100 best bars, although the name didn't change. There's about 800 bartenders, and they're spread across 28, so that's the first lie. So spread across 28 different academies, and each of the academies will have an academy chair, which Vivian was one. And then, confusingly, of course, voters have to be anonymous. So that's a major difference between the Spirited Awards. So anyone who tells you that they're a judge shouldn't be telling you they're a judge, or they're lying and they want a discount on their drinks, which, fair enough. There are some expensive bars, which we'll get into. Now, what makes this different is, again, the ranking, you look at this list and you say, well, 50 bars, like, I can't believe they overlooked my favorite bar, which should definitely be on this list. It's absolutely criminal that this isn't one of the 50 or 100. But that, again, is not what voters are asked for. They're given the opportunity to vote for 5 of bars in their local region, so domestic bars, for want of a better term, and 3 international bars, and they have to have visited these bars in the last 18 months, or at least claim they have. No, I believe it's 8.
It's 8 now?
Yep.
It's 8 as of this year, yeah?
They don't have to vote for 5?
It could
Oh.
be 8, yeah. It doesn't
Cool.
have to be all 8.
So Hamish Smith from William Reed Media, which is the parent company of the 50 Best. So thank you, Hamish, for joining us. Cool. So it's 8 votes? Okay.
But,
Yep.
but 5 maximum, 5 in your market, yeah.
Oh, 5 maximum. Okay, all right, there we go. 5 maximum in the market. Right, great. And you have to, and those then get independently audited by Deloitte, which is a large accounting firm, depending on how many scandals over the last 20 years you've read up on, that either gives it more credibility or less. All right. Then we have a new award which has just been launched this year, and it's an aim. So 50 Best is very much 50 Best Bars is doing for bars what 50 Best Restaurants did for restaurants. A long ranking system that acts as a playbook. Pinnacle Awards, which just launched this year, is trying to do for bars what Michelin has been doing for 100 years for largely bars and restaurants in Europe. So very, very quickly, it's a 3-tier PIN ranking system. It's currently live in 7 of the largest and kind of most high-profile markets. And so US, UK, Australia, Mexico, Spain, Dubai, and Singapore. And each of these bars will get vetted by an independent and anonymous judge who has to visit at least twice. And what is unusual here, or perhaps compared to the 50 Best, is all bars must self-nominate. And that'll be quite a recurring theme, because one of the best ways that you can ensure that your bar has a great chance of appearing on one or any of these lists is to take the time to nominate yourselves, rather than waiting and hoping that somebody is just going to turn up from this organization because your bar is excellent but nobody has ever heard of it. Right? And so, self-nomination is a really, really important thing. Incredibly detailed criteria, which are published online. One of the things which is unique here, it's the only awards which at least publicly says that you should consider and include venue design and atmosphere. So typically we're voting for things like, what are the best drinks? What are the most influential cocktails that have been born at this bar? And do I like the bartenders and the bar team and the bar manager? The criteria here is much more specific, and it has very, very clear allocations. Stefano,
Yes.
you've got 2 bars?
I got 2 bars.
You've got 2 pins.
I got 2 pins because I self-nominate myself.
Fantastic. Okay.
And I think, and it's embarrassing because we are the only 2 bars in Australia. And I find that embarrassing because it means that nobody took 1 hour to fill up the form of a Pinnacle Guide, which gives me better outcome because, but I think it's sad that my 2 bars are there. I felt weird about it. But yeah, we have 2 bars in this.
So, but you took the time as a bar owner to nominate
I
yourself.
took the time to tell to my team, do you want to be part of this new award? You need to put the times in. So the 2 manager spend the night writing a lot of information. Is an exhausting one. There is a lot of detail to go to this.
Yep.
But that's how you get awards, I guess.
Great. So one thing which is the only slight quirk to the system is there may have been other Australian bars that nominated themselves but didn't meet the criteria.
Is also the way that you do it tierly. Like you need to write things properly. That's why I use ChatGPT, because if I write it, it's going to sound bad. ChatGPT, my best friend.
All right. Well,
amazing.
speaking of AI, we actually get onto an AI generated list, which is the other and perhaps slightly most confusing of all the awards, which is Top 500 Bars. Now, Top 500 Bars was launched in 2019, and it's a kind of digital aggregator of all other sources. So to give you a sense of what this is trying to do, this is Rotten Tomatoes, for the bar industry, right? So this is an aggregator of all other sources. So everybody's local lists, 50 Best, Spirited Awards, eventually I would say the Pinnacle Guide, will all go into this kind of miasma and get swirled around and then get generated based on a ranking system which is a little bit opaque. The aim here was, the problem they were trying to solve was bartenders said, it's very, very hard for my bar to get on the 50 best list. Or it's very, very hard. We're not based in the US, so it's nearly impossible to win a Tails Award. We're competing with so many bars. So logically, if you make 500 bars available, then you'll get greater representation, which is exactly what happened. Although, and that was their stated outcome. We want to reflect a much wider geographical spread. But actually what you'll see is because they're drawing on the same sources and often the same people as 50 Best and the Spirited Awards, there's actually a massive overlap. So 64% of the list contains of the top 50 in 500 bars are the same as 50 Best. And most of the ones the 38% that aren't in here, with one exception, are all bars that have previously featured in the 50 Best as well. So there's a kind of an overlap. And that's not really a surprise because the judges themselves are typically drawn from the same groups of people, and the noisiest people on social media and that sort of thing are all drawn from the same group. However, this is probably, we would agree, wouldn't you, Stefano? This is currently the most credible because your bar is currently number one.
I tell you something, because you guys don't know, because we won this list. When you win the 500 best, you're in Australia. Mm-hmm. Every magazine in Australia wrote the best bar in the world is in Sydney. So you're talking about, this is a business. You do bartending, your own bars. That's our business. So I want to make money. So when that news came out, my line doubled. And that's 500 best. Mm-hmm. Consumer don't care if it's 50, 500. They don't know.
It's best.
They say everybody took that thing, said we were the best bar in the world. That last summer, we made a lot of money.
Great, congratulations.
So that's the goal of award.
Yep.
Sellout of the year!
New winner.
I will never be like you. I'll try.
Mantle's passed.
All right, so I mean, congratulations first of all, because a bar from Sydney, I mean, I would probably say if you've been in the industry a long time, Sydney is not exactly an unknown cocktail capital, but it does give you a sense that, 50 Best, the winners have only come from 3 cities. So from London, from New York, and now from Barcelona. Spirited Awards typically heavily over-index in terms of, New York, San Francisco, London, Paris, etc. But let's talk a little bit about where the awards themselves come from. And, if you're from a large town or a small town, what are your various odds? And are you always competing with bars from London and New York? And the answer is yes. You are, to some extent, but it doesn't mean that just because you're from a smaller city, there isn't an opportunity. So in terms of the tales of the cocktail awards, the top Spirited Award winner from the smallest town, Belfast, population 345,000. That was the Merchant Hotel, where Sean Muldoon and Jack McGarry made their fame. And then Albuquerque, most recently, with Kate Gerwin, who won Best New American Cocktail Bar in 2022, 562,000 people. So give you a sense, yes, there's an implicit bias towards New York and London because they're some of the largest cities and they've got the drinks industry here, but it's not impossible for bars from smaller markets. And then in 50 Best, across the entire list, the largest city to be featured is, of course, Tokyo, 37 million people. If anything, you could argue Tokyo is slightly overlooked by the 50 Best and Tales, given the sheer number of incredible bars and population. And the smallest town, of course, to feature, can anyone guess? Tequila, 40,000 people, and that's really a reflection of the awards were often initially made up with people would vote for places that they had been to in the early days when people would, all of a sudden nobody was being, once upon a time, back when I started bartending, but long before Dan and Stefano, you didn't get any trips anywhere. Maybe you made it to like the industry conference in your own country, and then all of a sudden people started to get taken on brand trips, on conventions, and they started to pass through these major cities. And so we saw a reflection of towns that were places where spirits were produced. So tequila in Mexico, obviously. This is La Capilla, which is a kind of a place of pilgrimage if you're into agave spirits. Bridgetown in Barbados. So you saw like places where spirits were being made started to pop up onto the list. Cool. All right, and then what's the cost of a cocktail? Well, there's also another bit of a perception, which is that drinks are, you need to be a bar which sells drinks at a very, very high price, but there's actually quite a varied range. So the cocktails in this list, and the 50 Best list and the Spirited Awards, the most expensive at the moment is $36 US, which unsurprisingly is at the Connaught. And there's a little bit of a trick there for those of you who keep an eye on foreign currency. The cheapest cocktail currently available is 11,000 pesos, which thanks to the rapidly declining value of the Argentine currency, currency, thank you so much. It now works out to $8.05, which makes that, if you go to Floreria Atlantico or Tres Monos, they are selling drinks of extraordinary quality at what's currently incredible value. Cool. All right, so Vivian, let's talk about what these awards mean for bar communities, because you used your role as Academy Chair to make Singapore famous. It would have been famous anyway, but you helped accelerate it.
I don't think I made Singapore famous, but thanks for that. No, I think it's been mentioned. I mean, Dan said that there's a certain type of there's the various groups and whether you care or not about the bar awards. But I think now increasingly everybody does care, and I personally do think the awards obviously they do matter, but you just need to see how it matters to you and your business. I think that if you're a consumer and you're going to possibly a new place, you don't really know where to go, you will very likely look at a best list to inform your choice of where to go, right? That's I think that's an easy win there. I think in a local market, I mean, just recently after the Asia's 50 Best Bars that just happened in Hong Kong, you had the wonderful team of Briars, tiny little bar in Bangkok. They did very well, and they said that, pretty much the next day, the lines went down the block, right? So there's going to be definitely an immediate bump in your business. The question is it sustainable? Can the awards make your business sustainable? I think if you keep doing a good job, if you keep delivering what got you the award in the first place, then possibly. But I think awards can put a certain amount of pressure also. You have, for example, on the Asian bar list, you have Sago House, which is one of my favorites in Singapore. But if anyone has ever been there, you'll know that it is not Atlas, which is this beautiful bar in the photo. It is not an Atlas. It was basically a completely hand-built bar by the three partners, and it has lots of charm. The original venue had lots of charms, but you had to climb up 3 flights of stairs. And so I think when they placed very well on awards lists, consumers would go there having very high expectations and then possibly being disappointed. They're like, this isn't very fancy. Why did they get on the list? Or they just want to take pictures of the drinks and then they don't even drink them. Right, so you have these kind of things that can come out of awards. I know that, for example, we talked about Michelin earlier. In Japan, for example, I used to live there for a bit. Some of the bars and restaurants, they don't want any awards. You know why? Because they're tiny places to begin with. They have their own clientele. They don't need this, and they don't want it, because that's going to take any tourists coming in, anybody who comes because of the awards, is going to actually impact their regular clientele, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's half a dozen this, one other. It has its uses. It can be very useful, but with caveats. Yeah.
Cool. Great. All right. So now we're going to get into, just quickly, we're going to talk about a little bit about data. And I know many of you will look at this slide and go, dear God, it's like 3:30 in the afternoon on the last day of Tails. Don't make us look at spreadsheets.
Seriously, Jacob. God.
Yeah. But first of all, I want to pay credit to Kate Mickelson, who's from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they're sitting right here, actually. So the Twin Cities, which is what I would call a medium-sized market, so 2.5 million people. And it's the sort of place in the United States that feels like they get slightly unfairly overlooked by the awards, by the bias towards the coast and the bigger cities. So Kate, you've done an amazing job in pulling together this data, so I want to make sure you get fair credit for this, because I think it clearly shows the sense that there is, we tend to vote, perhaps unsurprisingly, that these awards tend to circulate the same names around and around and around, and often in particular the same cities. So if you look through each of these, you'll see very clearly on the right-hand side of the pie chart that 10 cities account for roughly 50% of the rankings on any particular list. And in particular, London, which has had 14% of all the bars ever listed on the 50 best, and New York slightly behind on 11.5%. Just behind that, Singapore, so congratulations, Vivian, on doing an incredible job. Fantastic. And then Paris and then Sydney. But then after that, you get into an incredibly long tail of occasional mentions. And so it's a real challenge, right, for bars and restaurants to that are maybe in a market that isn't one of those large cocktail capitals, to get a kind of a fair sense of the attention which is being given. And it's a significant problem, but there's a couple of reasons why it kind of makes a little bit of sense. London is the world centre of the global drinks trade, and it has been for 150 years. So it's where most of the drinks press is based. It's where most of the large drinks companies are based, with all of their various brand ambassadors. It's where people who write about spirits, and it's also where the PR companies who work in the drinks industry are based. So it's perhaps not surprising that London kind of seems to over-index, although actually when you compare it to the total number of nominations being received for Tales of the Cocktail, we always get more nominations for London than any other city. So there's a sense that it's, top bartenders who are hungry for these awards tend to gravitate to some of these larger cities. They open places that they think are more award friendly, and it becomes a little bit self-fulfilling. New York also is the center of the American drinks industry. So it's perhaps unsurprising that both of these cities would tend to do so well. And then of course you also see the consistency, employees only, Connaught Bar, Black Pearl, which is in Melbourne, 28 Hong Kong Street. These bars, once they're on the list, it's very hard for them to be dislodged. And so you tend to get a considerable amount of repetition, although you could also say, well, that's also an indication of their high quality and their excellence. If they really are great enough to win an award in the first place, then you would expect that they would continue to pop up on those awards. We're going to talk quickly about the awards themselves, like how many of them are owned or operated, who's getting these awards, and then we're going to talk about the impact on consumers, bartenders, and bar owners. So in the Spirited Awards, 8.5 of the 13 bars which have won are owner operated. The half refers to Ryan Chettiyawadena and Lioness Bar, which is in a kind of slightly strange half in, half out of a deal with a hotel. And then in 50 Best, 6.5, so again, Lioness is included there, out of the 11 winners are owner operated. So there's also a sense that bars which are owned by large hotel groups are going to have large PR companies and have an opportunity to make more. Somewhat shamefully as well, I didn't include it here, but it has only ever been, it took 50 Best until 2019 for a female-owned bar to ever win. Tales actually weren't the other way, so it gave awards, world's best bars were won by women in the first 2 years, and then they haven't really reflected it ever since. So there's a kind of a sense of there's a bit of, not only have we got some kind of regional we could use some more regional diversity, but we could also use a lot more diversity in terms of ownership and that sort of thing as well. All right, so Stefano, perhaps, let's talk about what success means for bar owners themselves. So when you won one of these awards, you kind of alluded to it. Yeah. But what does it mean for the bottom line? What's good and what's bad?
What's good?
Oh, sorry, just before we do that, sorry, because this drink came out a little early. And I wanted to pay homage to Singapore, obviously, so I've stolen a drink, which is what 50 Best bars and bar owners do. Take a drink which I found at Jigger and Pony last year, so the Yuzu Whiskey Sour, but then tequila is trending, so we've put some Patron in it, and Saint Germain, which in 2007 was the first ever winner of the Tales of the Cocktail Best New Product. So let's see if we can just go here. So this is a yuzu margarita inspired by a wonderful yuzu whiskey sour created by Hugo Zhang, who's the head bartender at Jigger and Pony. So Patron Al Alto, Saint Germain, yuzu marmalade, and lime juice. And I think you'll agree that this is delicious. So thank you, Indra and your team, for letting me steal your drink with quasi-attribution. All right. Let's go back now to, all right, Stefano, what is success?
Yeah. Success for a bar, it definitely gives you, first of all, as I was saying before, is a business. So my bar, as soon as you enter the list, we were in not the central position of Sydney, we were a bit far away, and it really became busier. So it's easier to retain staff because people want to work with me, maybe just because they like me, I don't know. But they like the fact that if you work, and maybe Sammy, you get to travel the world, and you get to be on the global scene. Personally, it gives me recognition and puts me in the same level as other people, so I can, I feel relevant as well, because maybe I didn't. And I think there is a lot of pros, but it never goes into my head. I never see I win an award and I'm done. Actually, the next morning, I start again. So if you see it as I got it, then it's very dangerous. But if you see it as a starting point, then it's very beautiful. That's what I have to say.
Great. Okay. Sandrae, for you then, like, obviously you are, spend a lot of your time helping us make cocktails more famous with the general public. So you alluded to it a little bit at the start. I mean, how do consumers, our guests, how do they, are they sitting on the phones looking for these awards or wanting to make bookings?
No, I mean, consumers have become much more cocktail conscious anyway, and they love going out to drink, but also finding the right places to go. Sometimes the awards can be a bit, I think, confusing for them, because I can't remember who it was that said, they'll go to a best bar thinking that it's going to be a hotel bar. They're expecting that level of service, but it might not be that. Yeah. And I remember speaking to Tato from Florero, and he was saying that when he won an award, that it actually deterred a lot of his locals, because lots of consumers were going there that didn't used to go there. So they weren't getting the same experience that they were expecting before. So it can be a double-edged sword, I think. But consumers love experiences. They love to feel that they're in the know. So these best categories they love, generally.
So I think you allude to one point about potentially some of the downsides, because obviously if you're a bar owner, you must think it's absolutely amazing, right, to have a queue out the street. We spoke to Lorenzo Antinori, who just won Best Bar in Asia last week, and he said, he's got a line of people sitting in picnic chairs outside the bar on Mondays and Tuesdays waiting to get space. Now this is Hong Kong, where they're obsessed about queuing as a general rule. Anyway, but still, I mean, that's the sort of thing for a struggling bar owner, this idea that your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday trade is suddenly rock solid and reliable. That might be a great thing. One downside, of course, is if you're already really busy, then you potentially have a lot of pissed off guests that can't get in.
So Paradiso as well.
Paradiso is a great example.
Yeah.
You probably queue for longer than you spend in the bar.
Yeah.
And that's not their fault, right? It's a small bar and they've got a crazy scene. PDT, I remember when they won in 2011, the phone was running off the hook, and all of a sudden, the bar it only had 45 seats. And perhaps the most interesting was the Dead Rabbit, who won World's Best Bar in 2016. And they actually would say they were already incredibly busy, and they became busier. So the till tape, if you like, the revenue went up, but the profitability went down, because they had to hire more cooks, more bartenders, more security. There were more breakages. People were coming in, turning and burning for one drink at a time. So there is a kind of downside. If you're already incredibly busy, then maybe this isn't something that you need. All right, then, Dan, you talked about this, I guess. Well, you both kind of touched on it, but for bartenders themselves, like, what does this mean for bartenders to be working at a bar that gets an award or features on a list?
I'm going to prelude and I'm going to answer the question. So the guest opinion and the bartending opinion is very, very different. The bartending opinion lives in what's called the court of public opinion within our subculture of being a bartender, like what we know within our little group. And when you talk about 50 Best, which we keep going back to, William Reed is a massive PR company that changes the bottom line. That's why it's massive. If you go on Companies House in the UK, you can look at every other PR company William Reed owns, and that's why it makes a difference, more so than any other awards list. It's all just logic and research and pattern recognition. Simple as that. Now, for bartenders, if there's anything I can say, because I travel way too much to the detriment of my own health, is that the awards are a complete reflection of our community. Simple as that. Our behaviors, our interests, and what we are. They always will be. And the more you zoom into something, the more you see the details, right? And as our bar community grows, it'll be super hard to be super inclusive. It'll be super hard to make sure everybody's a winner. Everyone gets a little participation trophy, per se, right? It's difficult. And no one will ever be fucking happy, right? 50 Best went to top 100 because 50 Best went to top 100, and then Discovery, because top 500 was like, well, it's a game between them of relevance, right? And it's all logical when you look past the veneer. Now, for bartenders, I think back in the day, before all this happened, we shared this in a little meeting before this, we all wanted to own bars, right? We all wanted to have our own joint. And now, maybe because of the times, because of media, because of the way the world has changed and the internet, Many people feel like they'll never own a bar, just like many young people will feel like they'll never own a house. So now, instead, that avocado story, like you stop eating avocado toast, or you never own a house, which is total dog shit. So now, what's the point of having a dream of owning a bar? Because you look at the numbers, it looks ridiculous. But if I win a comp or I get on this 50 best bar, I'll travel, I'll see the world. I can't afford it. What was that? There was a phrase being thrown around. Bartenders are like champagne lovers on a lemonade budget, right?
That's true.
Right?
Journalists.
So my life is crazy, but if I look at the cost of what I have, I would never be able to afford to stay in the hotels I'm staying in, the flights I'm taking, and all this kind of stuff. So the thing in front of you has become more easier to try and grab and get than the long-term goal of possibly owning your own joint, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So for bartenders now, I think getting your name on getting your resume with a 50 best bar, because, or tails, depending which part of the world you're from, which award is more relevant to you, has become a way to get access to things that you will never get access to. And the kind of the only more abstract philosophy, dangerous thought processes, that's getting more increasingly controlled in a very industrialized system. We're no longer like just a bunch of people turning up to seminars going, sup, oh yeah, yeah, and all the same 10 people go to every single seminar. It's huge, it's an industry. They've gamified cocktail comps, they've gamified bar shows, everything has become cool, a brand will do this. I understand why they've done it. And I don't know if there's, I can complain, but I'm not sure I have a solution. But for bartenders, I think this has become a way for them, an affirmation for them in many, financially, life-wise, to find a way to validation. Massively. And so it's not enough for the guest to say, you're the best bartender in the world, you're my favorite bar. Now they want more and more and more, and the industry has fed off that to provide them different ways to validate that. Where it's gonna end, who knows?
But it became a profession. Being a bartender
Yes.
now is a profession. Before was, I want to be a Hollywood actor. I can't, because I'm not that good. I bartend on the weekend, Any bartender probably, I wanted to be a TV presenter. I wasn't that good, And then behind the bar. But what I mean is now is a profession. You can look up and you want to be a bartender. And maybe your dad or your mom or someone will not look down to you, So I think all this thing is helping to create as a new dimension.
Although I remember the first year that you got maybe, Sammy, I think, into the 50 best list, you said in a great quote, you probably don't remember, but you were like, Mamma Mia, of course, because you're Italian. If I could be the 50 best of something, could it be in an industry that makes more money?
I agree. I still agree to that quote. You're the 50 best of tell me one thing, you make money.
Well, exactly.
Sorry, I've been talking a lot about money. I'm not that greedy. I'm not like Indra, but...
But no, I mean, I think, obviously, winning best bartender of the year at Tales of the Cocktail, or getting a bar, being involved in a bar that's in the 50 best. We see this in the food and drink, the food world as well. It can become a launch pad, right? So once upon a time, you had to win a cocktail competition to get access to that kind of investment. I remember Michael Callahan, who came second in the 42 Below World Cup, and then got a call from somebody in Singapore, get on a plane, come open a bar, and that became, together with Jigger and Pony, 28 Hong Kong Street, which kind of launched drinks culture in Southeast Asia. So there's definitely these create launch pads. I want to touch briefly, probably bring it down just a second. Are these kind of, are we becoming a little over obsessed with these awards, and in particular, probably, the relative performance, like realizing that your bar is number 39 and not number 37, so you become deeply depressed, right? Even though that's really a statistical anomaly. So I guess for any of you, are we too obsessed with awards and lists? All right, that was the short answer.
No, but listen, it's only as bad as you treat it unhealthily, right? And at the end of the day, it's all about how much you give into it. I find, for example, sometimes success becomes a byproduct of just being good at what you are, and it all depends how you define said success. And there is the 50 best success, and then there's the basic financial success. Who gives a shit what the world thinks about whether it's a profession or not? Sorry. If I'm financially secure, I can have a family, I can have a house, right? I don't need some bartender's validation in some other part of the world if everything in my immediate kingdom that I can control is okay, right? But some people need that. I always say we either have hero bars or we have like machines. Machines print money. Hero bars are usually based on someone's face, one person being there. Because as much as we pretend that we vote for bars, you vote for the person. You vote for the person, right? It's the world's most influential bars as part of our little circle jerk. So the situation there is, I think, is sometimes we see people do extreme things, massive amount of guest shifts, unhealthy lifestyles, and we go like, cool, I'm competing against that, so I have to do more because they are winning, right? And that's the unhealthy part.
And also, you see a lot of people opening new bars now, and they want to know how they're going to get on that list. That's the first thing they'll ask. Is like, oh, how do I become a 50 best bar? That's the wrong reasons to be opening a bar.
I mean, I can just say that the number of DMs when I was Academy chair, I can't count how many DMs I got. Anytime a list came out, I would get, I'm not going to name any names, but I would get, comments about, why wasn't I on the list? How do I get on this? How did this person get on the list? And this is what's wrong with this, and da-da-da. And I would get some very interesting ones. I had somebody from Armenia, how do I get on the list? It's like, mate, you're not even in my market. And then, so I think when as Sandrae said, if you're opening a new bar and that's the first thing on your mind, you got bigger problems. Bigger problems. How about just run a really good fucking business?
So when you got these messages, what did you tell Indra?
I said, Indra, let's take this offline. And, well, he's the biggest seller. It's okay. No, I mean, that's basically what I said to all these people. I was like, how about maybe just focus on your business?
You're giving us absolutely delicious cocktails. We just want to make sure you go.
Indra, we're going to start on Neron now. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right. So quickly, obviously, if a bar wants to make a name for itself and get a Spirited Award or become part of the 50 best, what are the things that they might do successfully?
Be in it for the right reasons, I think. Be passionate, do the job well, look after your team, be proud of what you do, and then the awards come. If they don't come, at least you feel that you've deserved that award, and your customers feel that too. But don't be sort of thinking about awards as the first and foremost thing. That's what I think.
Great.
Yep.
I think also...
Have a festival.
Yeah, have a festival.
Great idea.
Do a festival.
All right.
Yeah, but we talked about this yesterday, which I probably...
All right, so when we look at all the Tales of the Cocktail Award winners and the 50 best, there are definitely some things which seem to pop up. So number one, I would probably say...
Italians.
Hire Italians, yeah.
Or open a bar with an Italian name in New York. That works as well.
You're not actually being unfair, right? So the last five Tales of the bars that have won 50 best bars have all been Italian or have either been run by Italians or Italian themed.
There's no smoky rooms, Jacob. No smoky rooms.
Yep. So hire some Latinos. I think this is one of yours, Dan.
But it's the biggest voting blocks. It's become very tribal. So I remember 50 Best at the beginning. We were all in a small-time church in London, and the 50th bar, on 50th place is this bar, and the whole room was like, yes, the best. The whole room is happy for each other. And as like I said, the community increased. Now it's like if this bar comes up, only people from that region or people who are Italian or like Latinos, except a certain bar in Mexico, they'll all just shout for each other.
We yell at the end when we win.
And it becomes tribal, right? And it's natural occurrence. I don't, like I said, it's just a pattern recognition that I'm seeing. I just wish that it wasn't like that. And the only reason it's like that is because you asked the question, how do you get on 50 Best? It's a game. That's the toxic answer. The toxic answer, it's a game. People play the game. They read the rules. They find a way to do it. There's a reason why Dead Rabbit was sending everybody their cocktail menu right before the Spirited Awards judging came out for the best menu of the year, right? It was not a dumb move. It was like, cool. Now the judges, because they're public, check out the menu. Who are they going to vote for? The coolest menu.
Well, there was definitely, having read 115 menus this year to try to determine which was the best menu, I have to say, a physical menu is a lot easier to read than a PDF, which completely fucking
But
sucks.
that was like back then. I'm not saying like now.
No,
right?
no, of course. But no, we get the same number of nominations each year. Another thing, if we went through the data, not to be trivial about it, but around 85% of all the award winners are in some kind of port city. And that doesn't mean, obviously, if you're in an inland city, you need to wait for climate change. But I think it probably is an indication that bars that are outward facing, that they're connected to the world beyond just their city, seem to cities that are kind of outward facing and plugged in and networked to a wider universe than just their own region tend to do incredibly well. I think bars that have a distinct point of difference, really, really important as well. And then remembering, obviously, that success is an outcome of hard work, I think, is the way in which you get your staff to be remain motivated. So just one final and closing note, two things. So the next is, consistency tends to breed success. It's the Connaught Bar, which has been the most historic best performer. They've been in the 50 best list. They've won everything that they can win at Tales of the Cocktail. They've been all bar one of the 50 best lists, and there's just a kind of sense of consistency there, which tends to ensure that they're always around. And then probably the next piece, I think, which is critically important, and I say this, in the 10 years of working on the Spirited Awards at Tales of the Cocktail, I must have said this 1,000 times. 100% of awards will go to nominees. So you can't, if you were a bar owner or a bartender, you can't do much about 50 best because that's a private list, but you can certainly make sure that your bar is being nominated if you're in one of the 7 countries for the Pinnacle Awards. You can do something to hack the algorithm for top 500. Stefano, what was it you did? And then
The festival.
Yeah, and then for the Spirited Awards, we're genuinely amazed how many times people say to us, I'm genuinely surprised that my city wasn't, didn't get a nomination this year. And I look through the data and say, well, I'm also genuinely surprised that no one in your city decided to nominate your bar. So, this is not a time to be shy. As Danil's mother likes to say, those who don't take risks don't drink champagne. So if you're a bar owner, bartender, if you've got a bar, if you want to support your community, take the time to nominate the bars and bartenders and bar teams in your city or in your region, and that will, over time, be likely to have a really great payoff of success. So, all right. Any closing comments from our panel?
I say you need to tell everybody what you're doing. You don't expect people knocking at your door and recognize your bar or whatever. You are your number one fan, and you need to tell people, not in a bad way, not being with ego and whatever, but you need to tell them what you're doing because we don't know. People don't know if you don't tell them. So you are your number one fan, and that's, I think, a very good rule.
Great. So anyone else? Any closing comments? All right, well, we're getting our 0-minute warning. And then Eileen is also here. So first of all, a couple of massive thank yous. I want to say thank you to our 2 sponsors. So Free Pour, so please take time to download the app if you have the opportunity. To Patron Tequila for the delicious cocktails and for underwriting this. To Eileen and everybody for the Tales of the Cocktail organization, thank you for giving us this platform. And then the biggest thank you of all to Jen, to Ryland, to Jonathan, and the entire CAPS team who produced 2 delicious cocktails. They're the hardest working people in show business this week. Thank you to every single one of you for creating the delicious cocktails. Thank you to our panel, to Vivian, to Sandrae, to Dan, to Stefano. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to every single one of you for sticking with us until the very last minute. If I can ask one thing of you, if you're at the awards tonight, whoever wins, stand up and cheer and applaud because our industry grows when we recognize anyone's success. So thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.